Blood crusted her cheek, a brutal seal pressed into flesh. Agony pulsed where the hot iron had kissed, a searing echo of the town's judgment. Clara Voss collapsed onto the frozen scrub of the Redstone Basin. The raw wound pressed against indifferent earth. The wind, sharp as flint, scoured her torn dress and stolen breath. Shame wore with a raw, animal refusal to die. Then, through the blur of tears and pain, a shape materialized from the dusk, a silhouette on horseback, watching, still as the canyon walls behind him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I got something extra special saved just for you. The cold was the second branding. It bit through Clara's threadbare dress, gnawed at her exposed skin, and seeped into the marrow of her bones, a relentless counterpoint to fiery throb radiating from her left cheek. She lay where she'd fallen, half buried in brittle sagebrush and frost-rimed dirt, the vast, ochre expanse of the Redstone Basin stretching away in every direction under a bruised twilight sky. Bitter Creek was miles behind, a wound in her memory sharper than the physical one. They hadn't just exiled her, they'd marked her. Thief, the brand declared, a permanent lie etched into her face for daring to take back what was rightfully hers. Her mother's silver brooch, pawned by her own brother to settle his gambling debts. Defiance had earned her the sheriff's hot iron, her brother's averted gaze, and the echoing slam of the town gate. Every ragged breath scraped her throat. Her lips were cracked, tasting of dust and the copper tang of old blood. The branding iron's image, a crude, stylized T, felt monstrous, grotesquely alive on a crusted mess. She tried to push herself up, arms trembling violently, only to collapse again, a whimper escaping her clenched teeth. Die here, a voice hissed, sounding suspiciously like the sneering deputy who'd held her down. Let the coyotes finish it. But another voice, fainter, forged in the same fire that had hardened her against her brother's betrayals and the town's hypocrisy, rasped back. No, not like this. She heard the horse before she saw again, a soft chuff, the quiet shift of weight and leather. A shadow fell across her. Clara flinched, curling instinctively, shielding her branded cheek against the cold ground, expecting a boot, a curse, the final blow. Instead, silence. Then the crunch of boots on frost. A strong, callous hand, surprisingly gentle, touched her shoulder. Not a shove, but a steadying pressure. Look at me. The voice was low, gravelly, speaking English with distinct, resonant cadence. It held no pity, only a calm assessment. Clara forced a good eye open. He knelt beside her, a Lakota man clad in worn buckskin trousers and a thick, buffalo hide coat against the biting air. His face was weathered, etched with lines that spoke of sun and wind and hardship, framed by long, dark hair streaked with silver, pulled back loosely. His eyes, dark and watchful as obsidian, held hers. They saw the brand, the torn clothes, the desperation, and offered no flinch, no recoil. He simply saw her. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask who she was. He glanced towards the distant, jagged silhouette of the mesa cliffs, then back to her. "You walk?" he asked simply. Clara tried to speak, managed only a dry croak. She shook her head minutely, the movement sending fresh waves of agony from her cheek. He nodded, as if this confirmed something expected. He rose, turning toward the deeper dusk where the scrubland met the rising canyon walls. He gave a low, melodic whistle. From behind a cluster of skeletal juniper trees, 3 smaller figures emerged, leading 2 sturdy ponies laden with bundles. Children, 2 boys and a girl. The eldest, a boy who looked about 13, held the reins taut, his young face a mask of wary vigilance, his eyes fixed on Clara with undisguised suspicion. A girl, perhaps 9, stood close behind him, clutching the frayed edge of a faded, blue woolen shawl wrapped tightly around her small frame. Her large, dark eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and intense curiosity. The smallest, a boy no older than 6, peeked around the girl, his expression purely open wonder, untouched by the older children's caution. The warrior, Tala, Clara would learn his name later, gestured towards Clara. He spoke to the children in rapid Lakota, his tone firm but not unkind. The eldest boy's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. The little girl's grip on her shawl tightened, her knuckles white. The youngest boy just stared, fascinated by the strange, broken woman on the ground. Tala turned back to Clara, without ceremony, but with surprising economy of movement that spoke of strength and practice. He lifted her. Pain lanced through her body, a fresh protest from bruised muscles and the searing wound, but his hold was secure and personal. He carried her the short distance to the ponies. The eldest boy silently adjusted the bundles on one pony, making space. Tala settled Clara onto the pony's back, positioning her carefully so she could lean against the pack saddle. The rough would dug into her ribs, but it was solid. It meant she wasn't lying in the dirt, waiting to die. He handed her a small stopper gourd. "Water," he said. Clara fumbled with the stopper, her fingers numb, and gulped the lukewarm liquid. It tasted like life. She spilled some down her chin, the coolness a shock against her fevered skin. Tala mounted his own horse, the children falling into place beside him, the eldest boy walking beside Clara's pony, the girl holding the smallest boy's hand as they led the other pony. They moved off, not toward the open basin, but into the deepening shadows at the base of the towering mesa cliffs. The silence stretched, broken only by the crunch of hooves and boots on frozen earth, the sigh of the wind through the canyon's throat, and Clara's own ragged breathing. The branded cheek throbbed relentlessly, a constant, humiliating reminder. She kept her face turned away from the children, shame a hot coal in her chest. After perhaps half an hour of slow progress through increasingly rugged terrain, Tala guided them into a narrow side canyon, barely visible until you were upon it. A shallow overhang, sheltered from the worst of the wind, offered scant protection. A small, carefully banked fire glowed dully in a ring of stones, its smoke vanishing upwards into the gathering dark. A single buffalo hide teepee, small and patched, stood nearby. This wasn't a village. It was a temporary refuge, stark and transient. Tala dismounted and helped Clara down. Her legs buckled, but he held her upright until she found a semblance of balance. He led her towards a fire, gesturing for her to sit on a folded hide. The warmth was a physical relief, though it also made the pain in her cheek pulse hotter. The children hung back, a silent trio near the teepee entrance. The eldest boy watched Tala's every move, his posture rigid. The girl still clutched her blue shawl, her gaze flickering between Clara's face and the fire. The little boy squatted, poking at the dirt with a stick, stealing glances. Tala rummaged in a parfleche bag, pulling out a smaller pouch and a clean strip of soft hide. He knelt before Clara. He didn't ask permission. Dipping the hide in a small pot of water warm near the fire, he began to gently clean the crusted blood and dirt from around the brand. Clara flinched violently at the first touch, a gasp tearing from her. His hand steadied her chin, his touch firm but not cruel. His expression remained impassive, focused solely on the task. He applied a pungent-smelling salve from the pouch, a mixture of herbs and animal fat, cool and slightly numbing against the angry flesh. The relief was immediate, though the deep ache remained. Finally, he placed a clean hide loosely over the wound, not binding it tightly. He sat back on his heels, his dark eyes meeting hers again in the flickering firelight. He saw the shame, the fear, the lingering defiance. He didn't see an outcast. He saw a survivor. "The mark they gave you," he stated, his voice low and resonant in the quiet canyon. He gestured not just at her face, but encompassed the ragged clothes, the exhaustion, the isolation. It marks them. Their shame, their fear. He paused, his gaze shifting briefly to the three silent children watching from the shadows. A deep sadness, old and worn, flickered in his eyes before it was banked again. He looked back at Clara, his voice carrying a quiet, undeniable weight. "Now you're one of us." The words landed like stones in still water. One of us? The branded woman? The Lakota warrior? The wary, silent children clinging to each other in the wilderness? What did that mean? Clara stared at him, speechless. The sow's coolness a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. Acceptance? Or merely another form of exile? Tala didn't elaborate. He rose and moved toward the children, speaking softly in Lakota. The eldest boy reluctantly handed him a small bag of pemmican. Tala brought a piece to Clara. Eat. Rest. As Clara forced the dense, dried meat past her dry throat, she noticed a little girl still holding her blue shawl. One corner was badly torn, the wool frayed and faded, but embroidered along the edge, almost worn away, were tiny, intricate flowers. It looked familiar, not hers, but reminiscent of a style her own mother had admired, a fragment of a different life, held tightly by a child who looked as lost as Clara felt. She clutched a small silver brooch hidden in the ragged pocket of her dress, the one she'd been branded for stealing back. It was broken, the clasp bent, the delicate filigree crushed in the struggle. Two broken things, hers and the girl's, tokens of loss carried into this desolate refuge. The fire crackled. The canyon walls absorbed the sound, creating a pocket of tense quiet. The eldest boy finally sat, his back against a rock, his eyes never leaving Clara, a knife resting loosely in his lap. The little girl huddled closer to her brother, pulling the frayed blue shawl over her head like a hood. The youngest boy had fallen asleep against her side, his stick forgotten. Tala stood at the edge of the firelight, gazing out into the darkness of the canyon mouth, the route they had taken. He was utterly still, listening. Clara followed his gaze, straining her ears against the sighing wind and the pop of the fire. Then, faint but unmistakable, carried on a cold gust snaking down from the mesa rim, the distant, rhythmic clink of a shod hoof striking stone. Once, then silence. Then, after a breath held too long, another. Tala didn't turn. His hand rested lightly on the worn handle of the tomahawk at his belt. The firelight caught the hard set of his jaw. In the heavy silence that followed, the unspoken question hung like ice in the air. Found already? The second clink echoed, sharper than the first, a deliberate punctuation mark in the canyon's chilling silence. It hung in the air, cold and metallic, long after the sound itself had faded. Clara's breath caught, her hand instinctively flying to the rough hide covering her branded cheek. The wound pulsed, a sickening counterpoint to the sudden hammering of her heart. Across the small fire, Tala remained a statue carved from shadow and firelight. His hand hadn't moved from the tomahawk at his belt, but his stillness was charged, predatory. His gaze was fixed on the black maw of the canyon entrance, where the sound had slithered in. The children were frozen. The eldest boy, who Clara had privately thought of as stone for his unyielding watchfulness, was on his feet in a fluid motion, knife now gripped firmly, his eyes wide and darting towards the darkness. The little girl, the one with the blue shawl, had pulled her sleeping brother closer, burying his face against her side. Her own face was pale, her knuckles white where they clutched the worn wool. The youngest boy, Eli. Clara remembered Tala calling him softly earlier when he'd stirred, mumbled in his sleep, but didn't wake, blissfully unaware. Minutes stretched, thin as ice on a shallow creek. The wind moaned through the high rocks. The fire popped. Tala finally moved, not toward the threat, but deeper into the overhang shelter. He gestured sharply to Stone. A silent communication passed between them. Stone nodded, sheathing his knife with a grim finality, and began swiftly, silently, kicking dirt over the fire, smothering its betraying glow. Darkness swallowed them, thick and suffocating. Only the faintest starlight filtered down, painting the canyon floor in shades of deep gray. Clara felt the cold seep back in instantly, gnawing to the thin hide beneath her. The branded flesh throbbed with a renewed ache, a constant, humiliating reminder of why she was here, why they might be hunted. Thief. The lie burned worse than the iron had. Shame wore with a fierce, clawing fear. Had they found her so soon? Had her brother pointed them this way, eager to be rid of the living evidence of his betrayal? Tala moved like smoke in the gloom. He gathered the children close, whispering urgent, guttural words in Lakota. Eli whimpered as he was woken, confused. The girl shushed him, her voice trembling only slightly. Tala pointed toward the rear of the overhang, where the rock face curved sharply, offering deeper shadow. He guided Clara there too, his touch on her arm brief and impersonal, yet conveying undeniable command. Hide. Be silent. They huddled together, a knot of frightened humanity pressed against the unyielding stone. Clara could feel the little girl shivering beside her, the frayed edge of the blue shawl brushing Clara's cold hand. The intricate, faded embroidery snagged her attention even in the dimness. Tiny flowers, almost worn away, a style achingly familiar. Her mother had possessed a tablecloth with similar stitches, brought from the old country. A pang of loss, sharp and sudden, pierced Clara's fear. What story did this shawl hold? What loss did this child carry wrapped around her small shoulders? Time lost meaning. They listened until their ears rang with the strain. No more hoofbeats, no voices, only the endless, indifferent wind and the frantic drumming of their own blood. Finally, Tala melted back into the deeper night, a shadow among shadows, scouting the canyon mouth. He returned silently, his expression unreadable in the dark, but his posture less coiled. He gestured them back towards the dead fire's faint warmth. The immediate danger, it seemed, had passed. For now, dawn crept into the canyon like a thief, pale and cold, revealing a world rimed in frost. The tension hadn't dissipated. It had settled, a heavy cloak they all wore. Clara's cheek felt tight, inflamed. Tala inspected the wound silently in the gray light, reapplying the pungent salve. His touch was efficient, detached, yet the coolness brought a measure of relief. He offered no words about the night, only a hard look that said the threat remained. Life in the hidden camp resumed, but the rhythm was altered, underscored by vigilance. Stone took the ponies to a hidden crevice higher up, his movements careful, eyes constantly scanning the rimrock. The girl, whom Clara thought of as Sparrow for her quiet watchfulness, gathered dried mesquite branches for a carefully shielded cooking fire, her blue shawl constantly around her shoulders like armor. Eli, oblivious to the undercurrent of fear, chased imaginary lizards in the dust, his chatter a jarring note of normalcy that Sparrow gently tried to hush. Clara felt like a ghost haunting their fragile existence. The brand was a wall. She kept her face partially turned, avoiding the children's gazes, especially Stone's lingering suspicion. The shame was a physical weight. Yet, watching Sparrow struggle to fold a large buffalo hide alone, her small hands slipping on the stiff leather, sparked something else. A need, not just to survive, but to be something other than a burden, other than the branded woman. Taking a breath, the cold air stinging her raw throat, Clara pushed herself up. Her legs protested, weak from exhaustion and lingering trauma, but held. She walked slowly toward Sparrow. The girl froze, clutching the hide, her large eyes wary. Clara didn't reach for it. Instead, she pointed to a corner of the hide that had begun to fray, then mimicked sewing. She met Sparrow's gaze, her own filled with a hesitant question. Sparrow hesitated, glancing towards Tala, who was examining tracks near the canyon entrance. He gave no sign he noticed, his focus intense on the ground. Slowly, Sparrow nodded. She pulled a small bow and awl and a length of sinew thread from a parfleche bag near the teepee and handed them to Clara. The simple act felt monumental. Clara settled onto a flat rock, the cold seeping through her thin dress. Handling the awl felt strange, alien after the life she'd known in Bitter Creek, but the motion of pushing the sharp point through the tough hide, pulling the sinew tight, was grounding, repetitive, healing in its way. She focused on the task, the physical sensation momentarily overriding the throb of her cheek and the gnawing fear. Sparrow watched for a moment, then silently resumed gathering wood. casting occasional, unreadable glances Clara's way. Later, as Clara worked, Tala returned. He paused, observing her bent head, her hands moving with growing confidence over the hide. He didn't speak, but she felt his gaze, an assessment. He moved past her to a small, flat stone near the coal fire pit. He pulled a leather pouch from his belt and poured dried roots onto the stone. Taking a smooth river rock, he began grinding them with rhythmic, practiced strokes into a fine powder. Medicine, Clara guessed, remembering the salve. He worked in silence for a while, the scrape of stone on stone a steady counterpoint to the wind. Then, without looking up, his voice low and gravelly, he spoke. Bitter Creek. He spat the name like a bitter seed. Bad place. Bad men. Took much. He paused, the grinding halting for a heartbeat. His eyes, when he finally lifted them, held a depth of sorrow that startled Clara. They flickered toward the children. Stone sharpening a stick with intense focus, Sparrow stirring a thin broth in a small pot over the rekindled fire, Eli stacking pebbles. Like they took from you. He gestured vaguely towards her face, then resumed grinding, the finality in his posture forbidding further questions. The unspoken words hung heavy, and they will take again if they can. The cryptic hint landed like a stone. What had Bitter Creek taken from him? His wife? The parents of these children who weren't all his by blood? The weight of his loss, intertwined with her own, deep in the canyon shadows. They weren't just hiding from her pursuers. They were hiding from a shared enemy, a place steeped in taking. The day wore on, brittle and watchful. Clara finished mending the hide, the rough patch a testament to her small effort. Sparrow accepted it back with a barely perceptible nod, the first flicker of something other than fear in her eyes. Clara found herself grinding the dried roots under Tala's silent instruction, the rhythmic motion strangely calming. Eli brought her a smooth, gray stone he deemed special, chattering about its imaginary powers. Even Stone's vigilance seemed marginally less hostile when she handed him a strip of dried venison, without meeting his eyes. Hope, fragile as a spiderweb glistening with frost, began to weave itself into the fabric of their shared exile. Maybe she could be one of them, not just tolerated, but belonging. Late afternoon painted the high canyon walls in hues of ochre and rust. Tala decided they needed water. The small skin bag was nearly empty. He gestured to Stone and Sparrow. The spring. Quiet. Watch. He looked at Clara, then at Eli, who was engrossed in his Pebble City. A silent calculation. Stay. Watch him. He pointed to Eli. It wasn't a request. It was trust, thin and new, but trust nonetheless. Stone's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing, turning to follow Sparrow toward a narrow cleft in the rock wall Tala indicated. Clara sat beside Eli, the vast quiet of the canyon settling around them. The boy hummed tunelessly, stacking pebbles. The absence of the others felt immense. Clara scanned the rimrock, the shadows deepening as the sun dipped lower. Every rustle of dry grass, every sigh of wind, set her nerves jangling. The fear of pursuit was a living thing, coiled in her gut. Eli, bored with his stones, wandered a few paces toward the canyon entrance, kicking at the frost-rimed dirt. Look, he chirped suddenly, bending down. He picked up something long and slender, holding up triumphantly. Arrow. Clara's blood ran cold. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the protest from her stiff muscles. She rushed to Eli, gently taking the object from his small hand. It was an arrow, not one of Tala's, which were fletched with hawk feathers. This one was shorter, crudely made, fletched with turkey feathers dyed a garish, unnatural red. And just below the crude stone point, the shaft was marked, not with paint, but with a deep, deliberate groove scored into the wood, forming a harsh, angular symbol, a crude H. It wasn't just a lost arrow. It was a signature, a warning, left deliberately near their hidden camp. Before Clara could react, a sharp whistle echoed down the canyon. Tala's signal, not the melodic one from before, but a short, urgent burst, repeated twice. Danger. Return now. Clara clutched the marked arrow, its rough wood biting into her palm. She looked from Eli's confused face to the darkening cleft where Tala and the others would merge, then back toward the vast, menacing openness of the basin beyond the canyon mouth. The pursuers weren't just out there. They had left their mark. They knew, and they were close. Too close. The fragile hope of the day shattered like ice underfoot. The harsh whistle died, leaving a silence that crackled like thin ice. Clara's fist clenched around the marked arrow, the crude H gouged into it, biting into her palm. Holt. Sheriff Silas Holt. The name echoed in her skull, colder than the canyon wind. Bitter Creek's iron fist. The man who'd held her down while the brand sizzled. He hadn't just pursued, he'd announced himself. Taunted them. Eli looked up, confused by her sudden stillness. Bad arrow, he whispered, his small face clouding. Before Clara could answer, shadows detached themselves from the rock cleft. Tala emerged first, his face a mask of controlled urgency, his tomahawk already in hand. Stone followed, eyes scanning the camp perimeter like a hawk, his own knife drawn. Lila, the name Sparrow now carried in Clara's mind, a gift of trust. Hurry to Eli, pulling him close, her blue shawl fluttering like a captured piece of sky. Her eyes darted to the arrow in Clara's hand, widening with understanding. Tala crossed the distance in 3 strides. He didn't speak. He took the arrow from Clara's numb fingers, his calloused thumb tracing the cruel groove of the H. A muscle jumped in his jaw. His gaze lifted, sweeping the canyon rim, high and jagged against the fading afternoon light. The message was clear. We are seen. We are hunted. We must move. Gather. Fast. Quiet. His voice was a low rasp, stripping away any illusion of safety. The camp, their fragile haven for a handful of days, was compromised. Action erupted, silent and efficient. Stone began dismantling the small teepee with practiced speed, folding the buffalo hides with sharp, economical movements. Lila bundled their meager supplies, pemmican sacks, the water skin, the parfleche bag with medicines and tools. Her small hands working swiftly, her face pale but set. Eli, sensing the gravity, clung to her leg, wide-eyed but silent. Clara moved without needing instruction. She kicked dirt over the remnants of their tiny fire, scattering the stones, erasing its warmth and its signal. Her branded cheek throbbed, a constant, humiliating counterpoint to the adrenaline surging through her. Shame warred with a fierce, protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Not them, not because of me. Tala moved to the canyon entrance, crouching low, studying the ground, the brush, the distant basin. Clara joined him, mimicking his posture. The wind carried the scent of dust and cold stone. He pointed silently. Disturbed earth where no animal had passed, a snapped mesquite twig showing pale wood. Then his finger traced a faint, almost invisible indentation in the hardpan, the edge of a shod hoofprint, pointing directly toward their hidden cleft. Holt, or one of his men, had scouted close. Too close. See, Tala murmured, his voice barely louder than the wind. Not just track. Hunt. He glanced back at the children, his obsidian eyes holding a depth of fear that chilled Clara more than the frost. It wasn't fear for himself. It was the terror of a guardian facing a wolf pack. He looked at Clara, a silent question in his gaze. Can you see it too? She focused, pushing past the fear, the lingering pain. She saw the unnatural break in the scrub, the subtle direction of the disturbed pebbles. She nodded. A flicker of something akin to approval crossed Tala's face. Good. We move like shadow. Up. He gestured towards a steep, broken slope leading to the higher canyon shelves, away from the basin's open maw. The climb was brutal. They abandoned the ponies, too noisy, too visible. Tala carried Eli on his back, the boy burying his face in the warrior's thick hair. Stone scouted ahead, agile as a mountain goat, finding paths through the scree and stubborn juniper. Lila followed, her breath coming in short gasps, the blue shawl snagging on thorns but never slipping from her shoulders. Clara brought up the rear, her legs burning, her lungs raw. Every scrape of boot on rock, every dislodged stone, sounded like a gunshot in the tense quiet. She constantly scanned below, half expecting to see riders materialize from the lengthening shadows. They found a higher niche as dusk bled into night. A shallow cave barely large enough for 5 of them, shielded by a tangle of ancient juniper roots. No fire, no light. They huddled together for warmth, wrapped in the buffalo hides, sharing body heat against the deepening cold that seeped from the stone. The wind howled like a grieving thing on the rim above. In the suffocating dark, pressed between the solid warmth of Tala's back and Lila's slight, shivering form, Clara's fingers found the hidden pocket of her dress, the broken silver brooch, her mother's, the cause of her ruin. She traced a bent clasp, the crushed filigree, the cold metal a familiar ache. Then her thumb brushed something she hadn't noticed before, hidden in the intricate swirls near the broken pin. Tiny, almost microscopic letters engraved into the silver. CV to MV. Always. Her father's hand. Charles Voss to Margaret Voss. A love token. A relic of a life before Bitter Creek, before betrayal. A lump formed in her throat. Had her mother cherished it? Had her brother even known its true value beyond silver weight? Lila shifted beside her. Clara felt the ruffle of the shawl against her arm. On impulse, driven by the shared darkness and the weight of loss, Clara whispered, barely audible, "The flowers on your shawl, they're beautiful." Lila went very still. Then a small hand found Clara's in the dark, guiding her fingers to the shawl's embroidered edge. In the pitch black, Clara traced the tiny, faded stitches. Roses, she realized now. Wild prairie roses. Lila's breath hitched, a tiny, broken sound. She didn't speak, but her hands squeezed Clara's, a fragile bridge built on shared sorrow in the freezing dark. "Who stitched these for you, little one?" Clara wondered. And where are they now? Dawn brought no relief, only a gray, frozen light, and the unrelenting need for water. Tala decided they couldn't wait. The spring was lower down, a risk. He would go alone, swift and silent. Stone argued mutely, his young face fierce, but Tala silenced him with a look. "Guard," he ordered Stone, his eyes including Clara in the command. "Watch Eli. Lila, help Clara." He met Clara's gaze. "If danger, hide deep. Wait." The unspoken "if I return" hung heavy in the frigid air. He slipped away, a wraith merging with the rocks and shadows. The weight was agony. Stone perched near the cave entrance, a small, taut statue, his eyes never leaving the slope below. Lila sat with Eli, trying to distract him with quiet stories whispered in Lakota. Clara busied herself checking their meager supplies, her nerves stretched wire-tight. The brand on her face felt like a beacon. She avoided the small, frozen puddle near the cave mouth, refusing to see the distorted reflection of the tea. Suddenly, Stone hissed, a sharp intake of breath. He flattened himself against the rock. Clara scrambled to his side, peering cautiously down the slope. Below, near the base where they climbed, movement. A rider, not Tala, a man on a rangy bay horse, clad in a thick duster, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He dismounted, crouching where their trail from the lower camp would have begun. He examined the ground, then straightened, scanning the higher slopes. Sunlight glinted off the star pinned to his vest. Sheriff, Silas Holt, recognition, cold and vicious, shot through Clara. The broad shoulders, the way he moved with deliberate, heavy authority. The man who branded her. He hadn't seen them yet, shielded as they were by the juniper and the angle of the rock. But he was looking, searching. Stone's hand found Clara's arm, gripping hard, his fear palpable. Lila had pulled Eli deeper into the cave, her hand clamped over his mouth, her eyes huge and terrified. Holt turned, speaking to someone out of sight. Another rider appeared, leading a pack horse. Holt pointed upwards, his gesture encompassing the rough slope towards their hiding place. He was methodical, relentless. He knew they were up here. Panic clawed at Clara's throat. "Tala, where are you?" They were exposed, trapped on a mountainside, stone tense, ready to bolt, to fight. Clara held him back, her mind racing. They couldn't outrun horses. They couldn't fight guns. Hide. Deeper. But where? Then Eli squirmed free from Lila's grasp. His small voice, loud with childish impatience, shattered the fragile silence. "I'm hungry. When's Tala coming back?" The sound, small but sharp in the crystalline air, echoed off the rocks. Below, Sheriff Holt's head snapped up. His gaze, sharp and predatory, locked directly onto the tangle of juniper shielding their cave. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. He raised his hand, pointing a gloved finger straight at their hiding place. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The message was delivered, clear and lethal. "Found you." The echo of Eli's hungry complaint seemed to hang, frozen, in the brittle air. Sheriff Holt's cold smile, the gloved finger pointing like a gun barrel directly at their juniper-shielded cave, sent a wave of pure terror crashing through Clara. "Found you." The unspoken words were a death knell. "Back!" Tala's voice, rough with urgency, came from behind them. Clara whirled. He stood at the cave's rear, breathless, water-skin forgotten on the ground. His eyes, wide and fierce, darted from Holt's distant figure to the terrified children. Deeper, now. Panic galvanized them. Stone Kale, Clara thought fiercely, a name earned in the shared terror, grabbed Eli, yanking him towards Tala. Lila scrambled after, her blue shawl catching on a root. Clara pushed her gently, then turned back toward the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. Holt was mounting his bay, shouting orders to the other rider. They were coming. Tala was already moving deeper into the shallow cave, probing the shadows where the rock met the frozen earth. "Here," he hissed, shoving aside a tangle of ancient, brittle roots. Behind them, barely visible, was a narrow fissure, a deeper crack in the mountain's bone. It smelled of damp stone and decay. In. "Quick!" Kale shoved Eli through first. Lila followed, whimpering. Tala pushed Clara toward the opening. "Go!" Clara hesitated, her gaze locked on the slope below. Holt and his deputy were dismounting at the base, starting to climb, rifles unslung. They moved with grim purpose. "Tala? Now, Clara." His voice brooked no argument. He shoved a water skin and a parfleche bag after her. "Take these. Keep them quiet." Clara squeezed into the fissure. It was tight, damp, and pitch black. She could feel the children huddled just ahead. Eli's frightened whimpers muffled against Lila. Kale was a tense shadow beside her. Tala followed, pulling the roots back into place as best he could from inside, plunging them into near-total darkness. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the muffled scrape of boots on rock growing steadily louder outside. The fissure offered scant protection. It was a dead end, a cold stone pocket barely large enough to hold them. Trapped, Clara's branded cheek throbbed, a hot pulse of shame and fear in the freezing dark. Because of me. The thought was a knife twist. She couldn't let them pay for her brother's lie, for Holt's cruelty. Defiance, raw and unexpected, surged to the terror. "No, they'll see the roots moved," Kale whispered, his voice taut with the fear of a boy trying to be a man. "They'll know." Clara's mind raced. Outside, the voices grew distinct. Holt's, harsh and commanding. Up there, cave mouth, spread out Jensen. Watch the sides. Boots crunched on the loose scree, just beyond their meager screen of roots. An idea, desperate and born of pure instinct, formed. Before Tala could stop her, Clara pushed back towards a fissure entrance. "Cover me," she breathed, not knowing if Kale or Tala understood. She shoved her hand into the pocket of her dress, past the broken brooch and pulled out the small piece of pemmican Tala had given her earlier. Heart pounding loud enough to drown out the approaching steps, she inched forward, peering through a tiny gap in the roots. She could see Holt's boots, not 10 feet away, pausing as he scanned the cave entrance, taking a breath that burned her lungs. Clara flung the pemmican hard, not at Holt, but diagonally across the slope towards a cluster of large, precariously balanced boulders further along the ridge. The chunk of dried meat struck rock with sharp talk, then skittered down, dislodging a small cascade of pebbles. There! Holt's deputy, Jensen, yelled from the other side. Movement, over by the slide rock. Holt cursed, his boots pivoting away from the cave entrance. Cover me, he barked, moving swiftly toward the disturbance Clara had created. Clara slumped back, trembling violently, pressing her back against the cold stone. Tala's hand found her shoulder in the dark, a brief, fierce squeeze of acknowledgement. Kale let out a shaky breath, but the reprieve was agonizingly brief. They heard Holt and Jensen searching near the boulders, their voices frustrated, arguing. Then Holt's voice, closer again, ringing out cold and clear, aimed directly at the cave. Clara Voss, I know you're in there. Come out now, branded girl, and maybe the heathen's brats won't suffer for harboring a thief. The words lashed Clara like a whip. Thief, the lie branded onto her flesh. Shame washed over her, hot and sickening. She flinched, her hand flying to her cheek again. Eli whimpered louder. Lila shushed him, a desperate, frightened sound. Tala's body went rigid beside Clara. In the suffocating darkness, his breathing changed, becoming ragged, filled with a pain far older than this moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, thick with a grief that seemed to bleed into the stone around them. It wasn't just for Clara. It was a wound torn open. He speaks like he did before. Tala's words were halting, forced out. To Anya, my wife, Lila's mother. He took a shuddering breath. Bitter Creek wanted the spring, our land. Anya, she stood, said no. Holt, he called her a squatter, a savage. Said she'd disappear if she didn't leave. The silence that followed was heavier than the mountain. She did disappear, found in the basin, broken, like she fell. The raw agony in his quiet statement filled the fissure. Holt hadn't just branded Clara. He'd shattered Tala's world long before. The H on the arrow wasn't just a signature. It was a killer's mark. Lila made a small, choked sound. Clara felt the girl's hand fumble for hers in the dark. She clutched it tightly. In her other hand, Lila pressed a worn blue shawl against Clara. Clara's fingers traced the embroidered roses, then brushed against something stiff sewn into the lining near the collar, a small, hard rectangle of paper or card. A hidden pocket? Before she could explore, Holt's voice cut through again, closer now, right outside the root screen. Last chance, Voss. Send out the woman, or we burn you out like the vermin you are. Fear for the children, especially Eli, spiked through Clara. Burning, smoke in this confined space. Her defiance hardened into cold resolve. She wouldn't let Holt take anyone else. She looked towards a faint outline of Tala's face, barely visible now as her eyes adjusted. I'll go, she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. Distract them. You get them out the back, somehow. Tala gripped her arm hard. No, his voice was granite. Not alone. He looked towards Kale. Can you lead them? Through the dark? Down the back slope? To the place of the whispering stone. Kale swallowed hard, the weight of the responsibility settling on his young shoulders. He glanced at Lila and Eli, then met Tala's gaze. He gave a single, sharp nod. Yes. Then go. Now. Quiet as owl flight. Tala shoved the parfleche bag at Kale. Take this. Go. Tala began to move roots aside, creating a narrow escape route deeper into the mountain's guts. Kale pushed Eli through the gap. Lila followed, pausing only to press the blue shawl into Clara's hands. Her eyes wide and pleading in the gloom. Keep it. Remember. Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Clara clutched the shawl, the hidden stiff patch against her palm. Tala was beside her, tomahawk ready. They were buying time with their presence. All right, hold. Clara yelled, her voice raw but clear, laced with defiance she didn't know she possessed. I'm here. Just me. Leave them be. She stepped forward, pushing through the roots, blinking in the sudden gray daylight. Tala emerged beside her, a silent, formidable shadow. Sheriff Silas Holt stood 20 feet away, rifle leveled, a cruel satisfaction twisting his features. His deputy, Jensen, stood off to the side, weapon also ready. Holt's eyes raked over Clara's face, lingering on the brand with open contempt, then flickered to Tala with pure hatred. Told you we'd find your little hidey hole. Tala, hand over the thief. She is not a thief, Tala stated, his voice low and dangerous, and you will not have her. Holt spat. She's marked property of Bitter Creek. And you're sheltering fugitives. Again, like you sheltered that squaw wife of yours. Didn't end well for her, did it? The deliberate cruelty in his voice was a physical blow. Tala's knuckles whitened on his tomahawk. Clara stepped slightly in front of Tala, drawing Holt's sneering gaze. My brother stole from me, Sheriff. You branded me for taking back what was mine. That's the only theft here. She held her head high, the shawl clutched like a banner in her fist, the brand burning but no longer solely with shame. It burned with outrage. Holt's smile was icy. Pretty speech, branded girl. Doesn't change the law. My law. He raised his rifle slightly. Last warning. Step aside, Tala, or we drop you where you stand and take her anyway. The standoff crackled. Wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of snow. Holt's finger tightened on the trigger. Jensen shifted his aim between Tala and Clara. Then, a small, frantic figure burst from the fissure behind them. Kale! His face was ashen, his eyes wild. Eli! He gasped, pointing desperately back into the darkness of the escape route. He slipped. He's hanging on the ledge. I can't reach him. The words shattered the fragile tension. Tala's head snapped toward the fissure, raw fear for the child eclipsing everything else. Holt saw the opening. His cruel smile widened. Seems your broken family's falling apart, Tala. Holt drawled, his rifle steady, right on schedule. He gestured sharply to Jensen. Get the boy. Bring him out. Now the real bargaining starts. Jensen started forward, toward the fissure, toward the helpless Eli trapped on a ledge in the dark. Tala snarled, half-turning, torn between protecting Clara and saving Eli. Clara's world narrowed to the deputy advancing, the terror on Kale's face, the image of little Eli clinging to a precipice, the shawl in her hand, the hidden secret within it, the brand on her face. None of it mattered, only stopping Jensen. She lunged, not toward the deputy, but towards a loose screen near the cave entrance, grabbing a large, jagged rock. She hurled it with all her strength, not at Jensen, but the unstable pile of boulders above him. The rock struck true. With a groan of shifting stone, the precarious balance gave way. A cascade of rocks and dirt, small but sudden, tumbled down, cutting off Jensen's path to the fissure and showering him with debris. He stumbled back, cursing. In the chaos, Holt's rifle swung towards Clara. You damn fool woman, he roared. But his shot never came. From the ridge high above them, a sharp, high-pitched whistle split the air, a sound utterly unlike Tala's signals. Then another, and another, 3 distinct, piercing notes. Answering whistles echoed faintly from further along the canyon rim. Holt froze, his face draining of color, his triumphant sneer replaced by sudden, dawning apprehension. He looked up, scanning the high rocks, his rifle forgotten for a crucial second. Tala's head snapped up too, a flicker of grim recognition. Then something else, a desperate, fleeting hope in his eyes. Lakota, Hope breathed, the word laced with fear deeper than any he'd shown facing Tala alone. Scouts. His gaze snapped back to Tala, then to Clara, then to the blocked fissure, where Eli was trapped and Jensen was brushing off dirt. The calculus of his hunt had just violently changed. The hunters were no longer alone on the mountain. The cliffhanger wasn't just Eli's peril or Holt's rifle. It was the arrival of an entirely new, unpredictable force. The whistles hung in the frozen air, a promise of chaos, salvation, or both. Tala met Clara's eyes, the message clear. The fight just got bigger, and Eli is still hanging over the edge. The high, piercing whistles hung in the frozen air, sharp as flint shards. Sheriff Holt's face, moments ago twisted with cruel triumph, went slack with a fear deeper than anything Clara had ever seen. Lakota? Scouts, he breathed, his rifle wavering as he scanned the high, snow-dusted rimrock. The arrival of an unknown force shattered his certainty, his control. Tala's reaction was a mirror of fierce recognition and desperate hope. His gaze locked onto a point high above, then snapped back to Holt. "You hunt children," he stated, his voice carrying over the wind with cold, hard clarity. "You hunt the innocent. The people see this. They judge." He didn't gesture toward the whistles. Their echo was indictment enough. His eyes flickered towards the fissure, towards Eli. Holt recovered, his fear hardening into reckless fury. Judgment don't matter when you're dead. Tala. Jensen, his deputy, still brushing rock dust from his coat, looked up, bewildered by the whistles and his blocked path. "Cover him. I'll get the brat." Jensen fumbled with his rifle, swinging it towards Tala, but Holt was already turning, scrambling towards the fissure entrance Kale had emerged from, intent on using Eli as leverage. Clara acted without thought. The blue shawl, clutched in her fist since Lila pressed it into her hands, brushed against the broken silver brooch hidden in her pocket. The hidden stiff patch in the shawl's collar pressed against her palm. Now, she threw herself not at Holt, but sideways, put herself directly in Jensen's line of fire towards Tala, forcing the deputy to hesitate. Simultaneously, she ripped at the shawl's collar seam, her fingers finding the hidden pocket. Inside was a small, folded square of thick paper, brittle with age. She pulled it free, holding it aloft like a shield. "Holt!" she yelled, her voice raw but cutting through the wind. "You want a thief? Look at yourself." She thrust the paper towards him as he paused at the fissure entrance. "This land? The water? You stole it. You murdered Anya for it. And this?" She shook the folded paper. "Proof. Proof my mother knew Anya. Proof you destroyed 2 families for greed." The words landed like dynamite. Holt froze, half-turned, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. "Lies!" he roared, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. His eyes fixed on the folded paper. A letter? A deed? Something tangible he hadn't known existed. Tala seized the moment. While Jensen was distracted by Clara's accusation and the looming, unseen Lakota presence, Tala lunged, not with his tomahawk, but with terrifying speed. He slammed into Jensen, a blur of buckskin and fury, disarming the deputy with a brutal twist and sending the rifle clattering down the slope. Jensen cried out, stumbling back. But Eli was still hanging. Kale, pale and trembling, pointed desperately into the fissure's deeper darkness. "He's slipping." Clara didn't hesitate, shoving the precious paper into her pocket. She dropped the shawl and scrambled past the stunned Holt into the fissure. The cold, damp darkness swallowed her. Ahead, she could hear Eli's terrified whimpers. Following Kale's frantic gestures, she crawled deeper into the mountain's guts, the passage narrowing. Then she saw it, a faint gray light from a side crack, and Eli's small hand desperately clinging to a jagged edge of rock, his legs dangling over a sheer drop into blackness. Lila was stretched flat on her stomach on a narrow ledge beside the gap, her arms straining, fingers inches from Eli's wrist, sobbing silently. "Hold on, Eli. I'm here," Clara called, her voice echoing strangely. She crawled onto the ledge beside Lila, the rough stone scraping her knees. "Lila, hold my legs." Lila instantly wrapped her small arms around Clara's thighs, anchoring her with surprising strength. Clara inched forward, her own torso suspended over the terrifying drop. Below, only darkness and the distant sigh of wind in unseen depths. "Clara," Eli wailed, his grip visibly weakening. "I've got you," she promised, stretching her arm down, fingers straining. "Give me your hand. Now." Their fingertips brushed. Eli made a frantic grab. Clara seized his wrist with all her strength, the small bones fragile in her grasp. "Pull, Lila. Pull," she gasped. Lila heaved backwards with a desperate grunt. Clara dug her free hand into the rock, muscles screaming, inch by agonizing inch. They hauled Eli up over the lip of the ledge. He tumbled onto them, a sobbing, trembling bundle of fear and cold. Clara gathered him close, rocking him, her own body shaking with adrenaline and relief. Lila collapsed beside them, tears streaming down her face, her hand finding Clara's arm and clinging tight. Outside, the standoff had shifted. The 3 distinct whistles sounded again, closer this time. 3 figures materialized on a rimrock high above Holt, silhouetted against the gray sky. Lakota warriors on horseback, rifles held loosely but pointedly. They didn't speak. They simply watched. Their presence was an immovable wall. Holt stood frozen, his rifle half raised but impotent against the scouts above and Tala, who now held Jensen's rifle trained steadily on him. Tala's eyes were fixed on the fisher, his breath held until Clara emerged, supporting Eli, with Lila clinging to her side. Seeing them alive, whole, a visible tremor ran through him, a release of unbearable tension. "Your hunt is over, Holt," Tala stated, his voice carrying the weight of the canyon. "Your lies are known. Your cruelty is seen." He gestured with the rifle towards a basin far below. "Go. Take your man. Leave this place. If you return, the people will not watch. They will act." Holt's face contorted with rage and humiliation. He looked from the defiant Clara, holding Eli close, her branded face uncovered and unashamed in the dim light, to the implacable Tala, to the silent, judging warriors on the rim. He saw the broken shawl lying near the fisher, the hidden paper now in Clara's possession. He saw his deputy cowering. The power had bled out of him, leaving only a hollow shell of malice. "This ain't finished," he spat, the threat weak, devoid of its former conviction. "Bitter Creek won't forget." "The basin remembers," Tala countered softly, a chilling finality in his tone. "Now, go." With a final, venomous glare that promised future trouble but acknowledged present defeat, Holt grabbed Jensen's arm, hauling the shaken deputy to his feet. They stumbled down the treacherous slope towards their horses, 2 diminished figures retreating under the watchful eyes of the Lakota scouts. The whistle sounded again once, a single dismissive note, as the scouts turned their horses and vanished as silently as they'd appeared. Silence descended, profound and fragile, broken only by the wind and Eli's fading hiccups. Tala lowered the rifle, his shoulders slumping momentarily, before straightening with renewed resolve. He crossed to Clara and the children, his eyes sweeping over them, checking for injury. He stopped before Clara, his gaze lingering on her face, the brand stark in the fading light. He saw no shame now, only the fierce, protected defiance that had saved Eli. "You are strong," he said simply, the words carrying more weight than any praise. He placed a hand briefly on Eli's head, then on Lila's shoulder, a silent benediction. He looked at Kale, who stood tall despite his trembling. "You led well, Kale. You are a warrior." Kale's chest swelled, a flicker of pride replacing the terror in his eyes. He glanced at Clara, then quickly away, but not before she saw a new respect there. "Eli slipped," he mumbled. "But Clara, she got him." Tala nodded. "We go to the place of the whispering stone. It is safe." He looked towards a high pass where the scouts had vanished. They will watch. For now, Gathering their scant belongings, the water skin, the parfleche bag, Jensen's discarded rifle now a grim trophy. They prepared to move. Clara carefully folded the warm blue shawl. As she did, she pulled out the folded paper again. It was a letter, the ink faded but legible, addressed to Margaret Voss from Anya, thanking her for her kindness in Bitter Creek. Speaking of shared hopes for their children, of the beauty of the roses she'd embroidered on a shawl for her daughter. Signed her friend, always, Clara's mother and Tala's wife. A friendship Holt had severed with fire and lies. She showed it silently to Tala. He'd trace a signature, Anya, with a callous finger, his eyes closing briefly in a moment of profound grief and unexpected connection. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the thread that had unknowingly bound them even before their paths crossed in exile. Lila reached out, touching the shawl. "Mama made it," she whispered. The first words Clara had heard her speak clearly. "For me?" She looked at Clara, then at the brand. "Not bad," she said softly. "Strong. Like Mama. Like you." Clara's throat tightened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken silver brooch. She straightened the bent clasp as best she could, then gently pinned it onto the folded shawl, over the embroidered roses. "For safekeeping," she said to Lila, her voice thick. "A piece of my mother and yours together." Lila hugged the shawl to her chest, the brooch glinting dully. Kale watched, then silently offered Clara's arm to help her navigate the loose scree. Eli slipped his small hand into her free one. They moved higher into the canyon, leaving the scar of their confrontation behind. Tala led them toward a hidden pass, the promised sanctuary. The wind carried the first flurries of snow, dusting their shoulders like ash. The branded cheek still throbbed, a physical memory of cruelty, but it was no longer a mark of shame. It was a testament, a survivor's mark, the mark of someone who belonged. They walked as one, the branded woman, the grieving warrior, the wary boy, the quiet girl, and the trusting child. They carried their losses, their fears, the lingering shadow of Bitter Creek and Silas Holt. But they also carried a fragile, hard-won ember of hope, the whisper of a new beginning kindled in the frozen heart of the Redstone Basin. The path ahead was uncertain, winding through a land of harsh beauty and hidden dangers. But they faced it together, found, family, forged in fire, bound by scars, and walking into the gathering snow.